Hey there, Citizen Paolo here, and welcome back. So the 3.3 patch for Star Citizen is up on the PTU, at least the first round of this 3.3 patch, and I've spent at this point about 4, maybe 5 hours with it. So I wanted to give you guys just some initial impressions, as this one is a big one. This one is important. Maybe not quite as important as 3.3 or 3.0, but maybe more important. I don't know. It all depends on how you look. 3.0 was... There's so much skewed around that one because we waited so long for it. You know, it was a year in the coming, and 3.3 is delayed a bit. You know, we're looking at, it should have been out 2 weeks ago realistically, and even then it's not going to be a full patch. We're going to get 3.3.5. We'll talk about that here in a little bit though. The big thing though with 3.3 is the performance. That's going to be the thing everyone's talking about. So this is the first implementation of bind culling and object container streaming. So these are made to ease the load of the software on the overall client and on the server a little bit. I'm not going to go too far into it, but essentially object container streaming basically makes it that you're only loading in the section that you're seeing, and then bind culling, I believe, is basically that the server is only bind culling allows you to do it on different threads, right? So the object container streaming is going to reduce the overall CPU need, and then bind culling is going to improve the multi-threading purposes or the multi-threading capabilities of the software. So combined together, these two things are going to make some significant improvements. And I'm happy to say, for the most part, it seems to be doing really well. So I would average my general FPS across all of my playtime at around 50. There's points where I've been up in the 90s. I've seen 94, 98 frames a second, and my system caps out. I have it locked at 100 because my monitor is only 100 hertz refresh, so I don't go above that. So we were getting basically the max that I could do. I have seen 30s though also, but I'll explain where those 30s come in, and it kind of makes a little bit of sense when you understand what's going on with it. But in general, like when I first would jump into the game at Port Olisar, up when you're inside the habitat, 55 to 60 wasn't uncommon. Down maybe in the middle area where everyone's spawning their ships, 45 was maybe a little more common. When you were on the ship out and away from everything, 65 to 70 was very standard. Some of the smaller stations or planet side, definitely planet side, down at like the emergency shelters and things like that, frame rates of 60 to 70 were really common. The 30 frame rate seems to come in far more when there's a lot of asteroids, meteors, whatever you want to call them, in the area. So places like Yella, out around Grim Hex, where there's all that whole ring belt of the asteroids for you, those are a lot more common. Also out in, not Daymar, but Delanar, where Levski is, because you have those mission hub areas with like that meteor centers that when you're in those areas, the frame rates will get down into the high 30s, give or take. I should also mention that this is running upscaled a little bit, so I'm running at 2560 by 1440. That way I can reduce it down to 1920 by 1080, have the normal aspect ratio. When I go ahead and upload it to YouTube, things are not stretched, but I am also running that on a 1080 Ti. So yes, higher resolution, but also a very powerful graphics card. Vega Death, who you've heard on the channel a little bit here or there, depending on what videos you watch, he's running a 1070 GPU at 1080p resolution, and he's getting roughly the same frame rates as me, maybe a little bit higher in some instances actually, so it does seem to be scaling fairly well. That doesn't mean everything's 100% perfect. As we said, you do lose frame rates in certain areas. There's also still a little bit of the hitching. Most of it is gone. I don't know how to describe this great, but the hitching always seemed to be like when someone would load in a Starfare or something big, the whole game would kind of stutter for like a second and a half, and then pick up and go. And it wasn't like a low frame rate, it was like stopped frame rate. 75% of those, give or take, seems to be gone. They're not 100% gone. There still seems to be a small stutter if you're doing a long quantum jump. Either at the beginning or the end of that jump, it tends to be more towards the end. There tends to be a stutter. It seems like it's loading in, that object container that you're jumping to doesn't always get loaded in time during the quantum travel. So you'll get this like stutter at the end of it. It's not too bad, but it definitely is noticeable when you're first coming out of quantum. You're just starting to get controls back, and then the game's like, okay, we're good. Which is a minor annoyance. I'm sure that's something, you know, this is still the early implementation of both the bind culling and the object containers, so hopefully they'll iron that out. And then there's still the occasional one-off where you don't seem to be doing anything special, but it'll just kind of hang. Seems to be server-side related. But again, maybe 25% of what it is in 3.2.2, so significantly better. Overall, these combination of things, the frame rates, removing the stutter, has made this version of the game far more playable than any of the other ones. You can actually do dogfights in the persistent universe without too much trouble, compared to before where basically I had to do it all in Arena Commander just because the frame rate was so low. The frame timing also feels better. We'll come back to that in a moment. But the frame rate was so low, it was really tough to dogfight because you're trying to turn and then like you're at 12, 14 frames a second, and then the thing's off out a different way and you're trying to chase it. It just wasn't fun to dogfight. The dogfighting is notably better now just with the higher frame rate. But the frame timing also feels better. I'm not an engineer, a software coder or anything like that, but there's a difference between frame rate and frame timing. Having consistent frame timing can be just as important, and I don't know how to describe this other than, like, you can go from an area where you have the 60 FPS, jump out to Levski where all of a sudden you're down to 30 because of the asteroids, but it doesn't feel like you just cut your frame rate in half. The frame rate still feels responsive, if that makes sense. Like when you move the mouse, the ship, although it's only at half the frame rate as it was, still seems to respond quickly. So that's the frame timing. It's like how quickly you go from the input to the frame on the screen registering. That seems to have been improved quite a bit also. All this combines together just for a much more playable experience, especially for the ground vehicles. So the wheel-based ground vehicles have always been something that I've enjoyed. The Cyclone was a lot of fun, but the Cyclone had a problem where basically you would get going so fast, the ground couldn't keep up with what you were doing, and all of a sudden there would just be rocks in front of you, or that one of those hitches would happen, and then boom, you're plowing into a big rock, and you're off out of control. Well, running at 70 frames per second down on the planet gets rid of that. You can drive around like a madman, and it makes those much better. Even better than that, though, is the bikes, the speeder bikes, the Dragonfly and the Nox. These now mostly work. I say mostly because at least with the Dragonfly, you're supposed to be able to deploy the landing gear in and out, right? So the struts come in, kind of retracted in, narrow against the side, and they're supposed to deploy out. They still don't deploy out for some reason, but the levitation of them, the grav lev effect of them, works so much better. If you try to and you intentionally run into a large rock, you will hit a large rock. But as you're going over hills, dunes, and even like small rocks that only stick maybe 2-3 feet up off the ground, you go right over them and it adjusts, it corrects for that like you would expect, and you just continue on. And these things are so much fun. I had so much enjoyment just flying around on the Dragonfly. I really got to get out and do some of the what are those, the races with them where you can fight with them. I think that's going to be really, really good. So far, like that's been the highlight of 3.3 so far, is the ground-based stuff just working so really well. The other big addition, I would say, well, several big additions. You have the ships. We'll come back to them in a little bit. But is the AI, the FPS AI, so the first person, the AI NPCs that are going to fight back with you. And this is in. It is mostly working, I will say. Right now, it's just very dumb. So I don't know if I have footage of this. I'm trying to cobble this all together post. But there's some missions now where you're going to go out and you're going to get into these AI firefights. Right now, there doesn't seem to be enough missions that have this in for how many players there are, so it's really hit or miss if you're going to be able to engage in it. The common one seems to be at Korea, the security outpost, where you would go to reset your bounty level. They now randomly spawn in enemies there that you get a mission to go fight. The problem is there's 50 people on the server, this mission pops up and everyone's jumping at it, that it's hard to be the one that actually gets out there. But I did manage to do it once, and when I got out there, there was about 25 of them inside Security Outpost Korea, and their AI was so dumb, it was almost laughable. It reminded me a bit of what I've seen in Warframe, where like they have a barricade that they want to hide behind and shoot over at you, but they line up on the wrong side of it. So they're on the side facing you rather than the side away from you, where it's not providing them any cover. It's sort of like that type of AI. That doesn't mean they're not dangerous, especially when there's 25 of them. If you're in just your flight suit or the light armor, they will hurt you pretty bad. I was luckily in medium armor, but even then, to kill off 25 of them, I think I used 3 or 4 med pens to get through it, because, you know, the weapon damage, especially if they were running around with a shotgun or something, is substantial. So the AI does have a lot to be desired in order to really be competent, but as something to engage and fight with other than other players that you're going to be getting a bounty for, seemed really good. And the improved frame rates just made the moving and shooting much better than it used to be. You're no longer like just dead and you didn't see the guy because the frame rates weren't synced up or anything. That seemed much better overall. They are going to need to either offer more personal missions with combat in it that not everyone's can do, or just increase the number of missions with combat in them overall. The missions are good. There's just not enough of them for 50 players, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The Mobiglass is much improved, not just in the overall UI, which is better, but just in the responsiveness of it. No longer are you like clicking things and then you're not sure if they're being applied or not. You click something, it responds, and you're like, okay, yes, I equipped that armor. Okay, yeah, I accepted that mission. There's none of this, is it accepted, is it not accepted? I'm not really sure. No, the Mobiglass is working really good. There's still progress to be made, especially with the star map version of it. While the new version is better, there's still problems with the transparency of it, especially if you're doing it while in your ship with your hood up. There's just the different layers, the lighting of it doesn't line up. It can also be difficult to click on like smaller points if you're trying to just go to this way station or something. Clicking that one little spot can still be really difficult. It needs like a, I don't know, a smart cursor or something that'll say, okay, you're somewhere in around Port Olisar. You're trying to click on Port Olisar. Here's Port Olisar, so you can set a point there. They've also added in the plotting system. So say you're trying to go to Grim Hex, but coming from Port Olisar, Grim Hex is currently on the backside of Cellin. I think it's on Cellin, whatever planet or whatever moon it orbits. It's on the backside of Cellin. Well, if you go ahead and click into Grim Hex and click plot route, what it'll do is it will first jump you to Cellin, then it will automatically set a waypoint from there to 1 or 2 of the orbital markers, however many you need to use, in order to hop around Cellin and then finally jump into Grim Hex the last little bit. So you no longer have to go 3-4 different, well, you have to do the same amount of jumps you would have done manually. You don't have to reopen your map every single time and pick a different one to go. It's just doom, and you follow them right through. So that's pretty cool. The early implementations of the truck stops are in. Right now, just one of them is within jump range, but it seems okay. It's hard to... It's a truck stop, right? You're going to go there to get fuel, maybe rearm, get out, maybe trade some items. So it's hard for it to be like, oh, this is really neat and fancy. It's just a truck stop. They're mostly implemented though. They're working. There is some, like, you'll notice, I'll put some footage in here where like there's supposed to be maybe like a sparking effect of like a blown wire or maybe smoke coming out. And there's just kind of a placeholder visual effect bubble there. So there's some features like that that aren't quite finished. One of the shops, the shops are there and the NPCs are in the shop, but the items aren't in the shops yet, so the shops aren't quite done, and things like that. It's hard to judge how much the randomizedness of it is going to work with just one of them, but, you know, for an initial truck stop, it's definitely better than what are the old repair platforms? I forget what they're called, but the old ones that we used to go to where it was just outside landing pads, they're definitely better, more interesting than that. You have a place where you go, you land, you walk around, you can trade items. It gives us more options for the trading system for making money. There's more vendors there now, so there's a better chance of turning a profit with trade going forward too. let's talk ships. So the Mustangs, they're good. They're better than they were. They're still, you know, they're an entry-level ship. So like the Aurora, there's nothing super special about them, but they're better. They're significantly better. No longer do you have to worry about climbing out of the belly of them and then falling through the planet because you weren't on a perfectly level surface or whatever. The front load is good. Overall, their rework it's good. I can't get too excited over an entry-level ship. The Valkyrie, unfortunately, doesn't seem to be in this. I'm going to guess that's going to be coming in 3.3.5 or whatever they call when they add Hurston in, but it does not seem to be in this version of the game. The variants are cool. I really like the infantry or combat version of the Cyclone. Has got a really nice, excuse me, a really nice like minigun laser gun on top of it. That's cool. The racing Cyclone is also really neat. I like the livery scheme on that, and that sucker moves. He's a fast little ground vehicle. The big one is the Hammerhead. So disclaimer, I'm not fully sold on the Hammerhead. I like it conceptually. Conceptually, a close support combat ship designed to keep fighters away. Gunboat, I really love the idea of. My problem with it is twofold. One, being so turret-based means if turret gameplay isn't good, it's never going to be a strong ship, right? If the turrets can't effectively track, target, and engage ships that are coming in 3-4 kilometers out, it's just not going to work. But even beyond that, if they get the turret gameplay to work, in order to be an effective ship, you need minimum 5 crew, so 4 turrets manned plus the pilot, but in order to really have its effectiveness, you're looking at 7 or 8 crew. So 6 turrets, pilot, and then like a crew chief running around repairing things or working sensors or whatever. So 8 players or 1 player and 7 NPCs, 1 player, 3 players, and whatever. You mix it up. It's just a very heavy load to be working with, right? So there's a lot of things that have to come together just right for the Hammerhead to be functional, to do its job. And the cost of it's really high for all those different variables to work. So that's my concerns about the Hammerhead. And that may or may not be coloring my opinions of the ship itself, which is kind of meh. I like the look of it, but it feels kind of small. It also doesn't feel quite flight ready. It's close, but like half the lifts generally don't work, or you get on, the lift will come down, you get on it, as it's going back up, it doesn't go all the way back in, and you get stuck in the floor and you fall out of the thing and it kills you. It just doesn't feel finished. It's close. It feels like it needs like another 2 weeks of polish before it's ready to go. And maybe that's part of why we're on the PTU and not on the final version of the game. Yeah, Hammerhead, mixed bag. God, I hope it's good, but I don't know. And not for that cost. It has me worried. I didn't get a chance to check out the Connie Phoenix, unfortunately. I mean, it's a Constellation that's fancier, so we've all seen the Connies and everything. Unfortunately, somewhere last night, after the first 2 nights, they took all of these additional ships down, so that's why I don't have footage of the Hammerhead. I was waiting until it was a little more fleshed out and working and I could get up and down the lifts before I was going to capture the footage. Today I went to log in to check and see, and they yanked all those ships. So all of the ships you don't own got pulled out of your inventory for some reason on the PTU. So yeah, that's about as far as I can go with that. That's mostly it. You know, overall my impressions of it in terms of performance are great. I'm very happy with the performance of the game, how it's running. I've really been enjoying it. There are a lot of bugs that need to be worked out. So the first time we jumped in the shops, none of them had any items in it. Not just the ones in the truck stop that was being added in. None of them. Even the ones at Port Olisar, there was just a bug where all the items were gone. They cycled the servers, those came back, and those were working. The party system seems to be broken. There's a number of little nuanced bugs that aren't game-breaking, but like none of the lights in the airlocks work. The airlock lights are just gone. They don't work. Now that's not a big deal, but it doesn't work. The chat system half works, half doesn't work sometimes. The communication system tied with the chat system, so you're coming into Port Olisar and you're trying to hail them for a landing pad, and they just don't show up in the comm system. They're just not there. a minor problem, but, still a problem there. On the good side, the long-running bug of where you spawn a ship in and none of the hard points are there, like all the weapons are missing, the door won't open, that one seems to be gone, so that's good. The insurance system seems to work the way it's supposed to now. I haven't had any problems with claiming ships via the insurance system, stuff like that. A number of other little bugs. I had a point where no matter what, I couldn't spawn a ship in. The landing pads just, although they were open, like even a single fighter just wouldn't spawn in. Which is a little annoying. There's some small things like your visor, randomly just like a ripple effect goes across the visor as if like you were first putting it on and initializing it, but it just happens randomly. Minor things like that. So yeah, there's some stuff that still needs to be implemented. There's a lot of little bug fixes that need to be fixed. There's been a number of crashes. So in my 4 to 5 hours, I've probably crashed 8 to 10 times. So about twice an hour I'm crashing. But once they get those crashes fixed, and if they can get everything reworking, this could be a big win for Star Citizen. Even things like mining, which I'm not really that into the mining, but just because the game's running better, I was able to go out and mine, and it was a lot better experience because I wasn't constantly dealing with the hitching. So the rock wasn't suddenly exploding because the game just froze for 3 seconds. I was able to effectively use the mining laser to do its thing. I'm able to run around and do missions effectively, and all that's really good. So 3.3, delayed, not quite ready, and obviously we're getting our content split between 0.3 and 3.5, but when it does finally drop, the performance gains do seem to be quite good and something worth getting excited about. So there we go. That's the initial impressions. This video is getting long enough now. We'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about 3.3.5 in a different video. Until then, though, this has been Paller. Thanks for watching.